So within this package right here, com.amigoscode.customer, let's go ahead and create the model for this microservice. So this will be customer. So this is a class. And in here, I'm going to use Lombok. So every submodule has Lombok in it. So here I'm going to say add and then data. So this is Lombok and then add, and then I'll also need the builder in here. And there we go. So we're going to come back to this class in a second, but for now, this is all we need. Now here, let's have a couple of fields. So let's have the ID as an integer. Let's also have the first name and last name as a string. And finally, let's have the email in here. There we go. Now what we're going to do is, so we've got the model. So basically we're just following the n-tier architecture, and I've got a bunch of videos covering all of this stuff, how to properly organize your application, so on and so forth. So here, let's start from the controller. So I'm going to say customer and then controller. So this will be at and then rest controller. This will also need the at request mapping. And we're going to map this to API /v1 / and then customers. And I also want to have the at SLA for J, just like that. So I can just log a couple of things. And I've just realized instead of a class, let's just use a record. And because inside we're going to pass a couple of things in a second. So just leave it like that. And now let's have a public method that will basically take a customer from the request body and then register a customer. So public void register customer. This will take a customer request, and we're going to create this in a second. There we go. And this customer request will come from the request body. So at request and then body. Let's log the customer request. So log dot and then info. So new customer registration, and inside we're going to pass the customer registration, just like so. And we also need to annotate this with at and then post and then mapping, so that we can fire post requests against this endpoint in here. Now let's create this class quickly. So here, new and then Java class. This will be a record, and let's just say customer registration and then request. There we go. And what we want to pass in here is the first name. We also need the last name, and finally the email. There we go. So this is our record, and the reason why I'm using a record and not a class is because I get immutability to strings, equals, and all that stuff for free. Whereas in here, I'm actually going to use JPA in a second. Now, inside of my customer controller, so this should be actually customer registration request, just like that. Delete this, and then let's just log that instead in here, and job done. So there we go. And now let's create the service that will basically handle this request. So let's just say customer and then service, customer service, and this customer service. So let's just create this class. So create class. There we go. And let's also change this to a record and pass nothing inside for now. And if I go back in here, so what I want to do is just say customer service dot and then register customer, and then pass the customer registration request, just like that. And I need to create this method in here. So there we go. And voila. So I've got the request in here. Now let's turn this request into the customer. So here I'm going to say customer equals to, and then customer dot builder. We're going to pass the first name from the request. We also need a last name, and finally email. And all we need to do is just say build. So this is the builder pattern, And there we go. Now let me just say to do here, and we're going to do this in a second. So there you have it. So basically right here, you can see that how the application is taking shape. And what we have to do next is just get the database up and running and then configure our application so that we can store the customer to our database. And finally, we need to annotate this class with @service so that Spring initializes this as a bean for us so that we can inject it in our controller.